Blair Whitmore had spent the morning chasing perfection, not vanity. Every brushstroke of her makeup, every soft curl of her blonde hair, was a quiet act of courage. She had circled this day on her calendar for weeks, a single heart drawn in blue ink marking her first date in nearly 2 years. She wanted it to feel normal: coffee, conversation, laughter maybe, but beneath that calm intention lay a tremor of hope that made her pulse quicken. Her soft blue dress rested delicately over her frame, the sash tied neatly at her waist, and the subtle warmth of her lip color was meant to say she cared, but not too much. She practiced her smile once more in the mirror, the one that looked relaxed, confident, even though her hands shook faintly as she reached for the mascara wand. That part was always the hardest, not because of vanity, but because every small task reminded her that control didn't come easy anymore. But she did it. She steadied her hands and brushed on the last bit of courage, ready to step, or rather, roll, into something that felt like possibility. The cafe she chose wasn't fancy, but it was the kind of place that felt alive with quiet charm. Tucked between a bookstore and a florist on a narrow downtown street in Portland, it smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans, the kind of warmth that wrapped around her like an old friend. Ivy crawled up the brick walls near the entrance, and tiny string lights framed the windowpanes like fireflies trapped in glass. It was the kind of place where people lingered, where time felt softer. She arrived early, 10 minutes before their agreed time, careful not to rush, careful to appear composed. Her wheelchair moved smoothly across the polished floor as she chose a table by the window. She wanted natural light. It made her feel seen, not shadowed. Her phone rested on the table, screen dark except for the reflection of her own face. She looked at the time. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. She reassured herself he was just delayed, that parking downtown was always a mess, that perhaps he was caught in traffic. Her heart fluttered each time the door opened, but it was never him. Still, she kept smiling, tracing small invisible circles on her coffee napkin as if to calm herself. When the barista came to ask if she wanted to order, Blair said she'd wait, her voice soft, polite. She wasn't going to let disappointment arrive before he did. When the door finally opened and he walked in, she felt that instant surge of nervous relief. He was tall, neatly dressed, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in crisp shirts and dark denim. His watch caught the light as he scanned the cafe, and Blair straightened in her chair, lifting her chin slightly, reminding herself to breathe. When his gaze found hers, she smiled, genuine, open, hopeful. She raised her hand in a small greeting. But the warmth she expected didn't reach his face. She watched as his eyes flickered, his expression shifted, his posture stiffened. That he took a hesitant step forward and asked her name, though she already knew from his tone that something had changed. "Are you Blair?" he said, his voice neutral, detached. "Yes," she answered, steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It's nice to meet you." For a heartbeat, she thought it might still turn around. But then he looked down, really looked, and she saw the moment the illusion shattered. His eyes dropped from her face to the wheelchair beneath her, his jaw tightening. He exhaled through his nose, a small gesture of disbelief that struck harder than any word. When he finally spoke, the air in the cafe seemed to shift. "I thought you could walk," he said flatly, not lowering his voice. "This is a lie." The words hung heavy, louder than the clinking cups and soft chatter that suddenly faded. Blair's breath caught. Around them, heads turned. The barista froze mid-pour. A couple nearby went silent. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, her throat tightening as if her body wanted to vanish before the stares could reach her. "I never lied," she managed to say quietly, her voice trembling but calm. "It's in my profile." But he wasn't listening. He waved a hand dismissively, the gesture sharp. "This isn't what I signed up for. You should have said something." His laugh came out bitter, clipped, a sound that felt like it mocked the very idea of kindness. "I can't believe this," he muttered, shaking his head, already halfway out of the moment they'd barely begun. Her heart thudded in her chest, each beat a reminder that she'd dared to hope. "I'm not broken," she whispered under her breath, more to herself than to him. But he didn't hear, or didn't care. He reached for his wallet, tossed a $10 bill onto the table as though it settled something, and said the words that would bruise for weeks after, "I'm not doing this." Then he walked out, the bell over the cafe door jingled, and then it was just silence. Blair sat there, still as stone, the edges of her napkin crumpled in her hands. The stares lingered, soft but suffocating. She didn't meet anyone's eyes. Her gaze stayed on her hands, the ones she wished would stop shaking, the ones that had done so much to make this morning feel normal. She wanted to disappear, to let the ground open and swallow her whole. But instead, she adjusted her posture, straightened her back, and inhaled slowly. Dignity, she would hold on to that, even if it was the only thing left unbroken. The cafe sounds resumed eventually. Conversations picked up in careful whispers, the barista pretended to clean, and someone at another table coughed awkwardly. But Blair sat still, her expression calm, her heart anything but. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the window, her blue dress glowing softly in the light that filtered through the ivy. She looked like she belonged in that scene, a woman waiting by a cafe window, but beneath that quiet image, pain rippled like an undercurrent, invisible but real. She thought about leaving. She could have rolled herself out, back through that door, back to the car where she'd practiced smiling in the mirror earlier. But leaving felt like surrender. Instead, she stayed, letting her coffee cool untouched, feeling every second stretch longer than it should. The hope she had carried with her began to dissolve into something heavier, embarrassment, maybe, or just the sting of being reminded that people could still surprise her, and not in the good way. Yet even as her eyes burned, she refused to cry. Not here, not where he had left her to the pity of strangers. She folded her trembling hands together in her lap, pressing them still, whispering inside her mind the words she couldn't speak aloud. I am not broken. She didn't know it then, sitting in that moment of quiet humiliation, that someone had been watching. Not with judgment, but with something closer to empathy. The world often has a way of unraveling us right before it rewrites our story, and Blair was about to learn that sometimes kindness walks in just when you think no one ever will. Blair sat motionless, her pulse still unsteady from the echo of the man's cruel words. Around her, the cafe had slipped into that kind of uncomfortable quiet where people try not to stare but can't help looking. The smell of cinnamon and roasted beans, once comforting, now clung to her like a fog. She stared down at the $10 bill still lying on the table, its edges curled slightly as if even paper had recoiled from the weight of what had just happened. She wondered if she should leave it there as a symbol of how cheap human decency could be. But her hands wouldn't move. They stayed in her lap, resting one over the other, pale and trembling. She forced herself to breathe, to hold her spine straight, to pretend she didn't feel like she was collapsing from the inside out, and then, from somewhere nearby, a small, curious voice broke through the silence that had swallowed her. Daddy, why is that lady sad? The words were innocent, soft, yet they hit her like sunlight after a storm. Blair's head lifted instinctively, eyes searching for the voice, and there she saw her, a little girl no older than 6, dressed in a pink dress sprinkled with tiny white flowers. Her golden curls bounced lightly as she shifted from one foot to the other, clutching a stuffed toy that seemed to be half bunny, half unicorn. The child's eyes were wide and unguarded, the way only a child's could be. Beside her, crouching to the girl's level, was a man. His presence was calm, grounded. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched faintly with gray near his temples. The long coat he wore brushed against his knees as he knelt, his expression kind but thoughtful, his gaze following his daughters toward Blair. He didn't flinch. He didn't look startled or awkward. He simply looked, really looked, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Blair felt seen rather than noticed. The little girl tugged gently on his sleeve. Can we help her? She asked again, her voice tinged with an urgency that children reserve for simple truths. The man rose to his full height, his eyes meeting Blair's across the small space. There was no pity in them, no uncomfortable pause while he tried to find the right words. Instead, there was only quiet sincerity. Do you mind some company? He asked softly, his voice carrying just enough warmth to make it an invitation, not an intrusion. Rosie's pretty good at cheering people up. Blair hesitated. She wasn't sure she could speak without her voice cracking, wasn't sure she could bear another stranger's kindness when her pride already felt so fragile. But something about the way he said it, gently, like he understood without needing to ask, made her nod before she could second-guess herself. Sure, she said quietly. I'd like that. Rosie's face lit up as though she'd just been handed permission to save the world. She scrambled into the empty chair across from Blair, her small legs swinging freely as she placed her stuffed unicorn on the seat beside her. From her tiny glitter-covered backpack, she pulled out a sheet of stickers. "These are my sparkle stars," she announced proudly. "You can have some. They make people feel better." She peeled one off, a golden one shaped like a shooting star, and reached across the table to hand it to Blair. Blair took it slowly, her fingers brushing against the child's tiny hand. The paper star glimmered faintly under the cafe lights. She tried to smile, and for the first time since the man had walked out, it didn't feel forced. "Thank you, Rosie," she said softly. "That's very kind of you." The little girl grinned. "You can put it anywhere. Daddy says good things stick better when you keep them close." She began sticking a few of her own to her stuffed unicorn's ears, humming a song under her breath that made the air feel lighter. The man, her father, watched quietly from the side before pulling out the chair next to his daughter. "I hope we're not intruding," he said, his tone gentle but respectful. "She's not good at minding her own business." "Neither am I, sometimes," Blair admitted, her voice still a little shaky. "It's okay. She's sweet." He smiled, and the corners of his eyes softened. "I'm Adam," he said, offering his name like an olive branch. "And this one's Rosie. We were just grabbing muffins before her dance class. She noticed you from the counter." He nodded toward the window. "You seemed like you could use a little company." Blair looked down at the golden sticker in her hand again, her throat tightening, not with pain this time, but something gentler. "You noticed that?" "I try to," he said simply. "The world moves too fast not to notice the quiet things." She nodded faintly, unsure how to respond. His calm made her uneasy at first, not because it was unwelcome, but because it felt rare. People usually filled silence with apologies or pity. Adam didn't. He just let it exist. That alone made her feel safer than she expected to feel sitting across from a stranger. Rosie interrupted their silence by holding out another sticker. "This one's for your chair," she declared. "So it can sparkle too." Blair blinked, surprised by how easily the child saw her wheelchair not as something sad or strange, but as something worthy of decoration, something normal. It was such a small gesture, yet it cracked open something inside Blair that had been locked away. She accepted it, pressing the tiny star onto the armrest, and smiled. "That's perfect," she whispered. "Now it's official. It's a sparkle chair." Rosie giggled, proud of herself. "See, Daddy? She likes it." Adam chuckled softly. "I see that." Then, turning back to Blair, he asked, "Do you come here often?" Blair hesitated before answering. "Sometimes. It's quiet. I like the way it smells like cinnamon." "Then you have good taste," he said. "Rosie only eats the frosting off the muffins, so we're keeping this place in business one pastry at a time." That drew a small laugh out of Blair, a sound she hadn't expected to make today. The tension in her chest began to dissolve, and she could feel herself breathe again. The sting of what had happened earlier still lingered, but its edges were duller now, softened by the warmth of the moment. For a few precious minutes, the cafe felt normal again. Rosie chatted about her dance class and how her teacher always wore socks with stripes. Adam listened to her with the patient affection of a father who found joy in every word his daughter spoke. Blair watched them both, feeling something stir inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. Connection, maybe even belonging. She thought of how fragile the morning had felt before this, how the cruelness of a single man had almost stolen her courage. But here, in the same space where she'd been humiliated, a little girl with golden curls was showing her what grace could look like. Adam didn't treat her as fragile, didn't treat her as someone broken. He looked at her like she was human, just a woman who deserved kindness. As the minutes passed, Blair realized that the ache in her chest wasn't just from pain anymore. It was from something returning, something she thought she'd buried for good. Maybe hope wasn't a fool's game after all. Maybe sometimes, life had a way of sending back the very thing it took away, just dressed differently, holding a child's hand, offering a golden sticker, and a smile that didn't ask for anything in return.